Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the September 27th meeting of the Administration and Public Works Committee. I am Jonathan Nusma, representing the 4th Ward and chairing the ANPW committee meeting tonight. I'll call the meeting to order, a quorum being present, and I'll start by requesting a roll call.
Councilmember Kelly. Here. Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Councilmember Nusma.
Here.
Councilmember Burns. Councilmember Reed.
Councilmember Reed is participating via Zoom, if that's correct. Councilmember Reed, are you there? Okay. I assume Councilmember Reed is on his way here in person. We still do have a quorum, so let's continue. And I will start the evening by welcoming our newest member, the council member from the 2nd Ward, Chrissy Harris.
Thank you.
Councilmember Harris, welcome to the party. It's going to be a lot of fun, so Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's move on with public comment. We have 4 people signed up for public comment this evening, all of whom are participating remotely. In order, we've got Mike Vasilko, TJ Callan, Tricia Connolly, and Mary Rosinski. 2 minutes each, and let's get started with Mr. Vasilko.
Thank you. Regarding item A8, according to city staff, there is $400,000 yet to be paid to the Robert Crown Center contractor, meaning the city has leverage to get the contract to repair flaws in new construction at their expense. One such issue at Robert Crown is the active concrete cracks developing on the first floor. The spider web of cracks occurs throughout 4,000 square feet of the lobby where there are no control joints. Cracks vary in width and depth, many encircling chunks of concrete that may ultimately pop out. Staff describes the slab as a 2-way reinforced concrete slab bearing on caissons, meaning the slab is suspended and does not bear on the soil. 1/4-inch wide cracks are not normal for a suspended structural concrete slab. It is dangerous to minimize the concern by comparing Crown's structural concrete floor to a cheap retail food store slab on grade. Doing so exhibits a serious lack of engineering expertise. And forgive me for being candid, but it's an amateur comparison. It is normal for a cheap retail, mildly reinforced concrete slab on grade to crack. It is not normal for a structural slab to develop 1/4-inch wide cracks. The document circulated entitled Research into Engineering Specs is not research at all. It's a Google search. The sentences copied from Google are not engineering specs. Engineering specifications are prepared by licensed engineers from which contractors build. Contractors don't build from Google searches. To suggest this document confirms staff's opinion that 1/4-inch wide cracks in structural concrete is okay is a ludicrous statement. With all due respect, staff does not have the expertise to make this judgment, and nor does anyone at the dais. We're discussing a matter of structural integrity. The concrete at Robert Crown floor photographs have been circulated and they speak for themselves. Get a modest WIS-Janie report for $12,800.
2 minutes, sir.
Find out the results and hold the contractors responsible for their obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have TJ Callan.
Hi, I'm TJ Callahan. I'm the owner of Farmhouse in downtown Evanston. I'm addressing item, I believe it's A14, proposal to amend the costs of the Class C liquor licenses. As many of you, I'm sure, know, downtown Evanston's restaurant community has been devastated by the pandemic. A lot of our downtown restaurants are dependent upon Northwestern University, business travelers, and a strong office community, none of which has been in place. I think the assumption for a increased liquor license costing in downtown is based on the assumption that we're doing higher volumes. But I don't think that's been the case. I think we've been decimated by the pandemic at a higher rate than perhaps some of the neighborhood restaurants have been. So, changing the liquor license puts a level playing field in place for the downtown restaurants and makes it a little more likely that we'll be able to survive and hopefully in the future to thrive again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Next up is Tricia Connolly. We'll come back to Ms. Connolly and go to Mary Rosinski.
Hi, thank you very much. I am here, I agree 100% with Mike Vasilko. This project of Robert Crown was the most expensive project in the history of Evanston, I believe. And while we're still under construction contract warranties, it would behoove us not to overlook something that could be a huge expense later. And when you all buy houses and condos, you do an inspection, an independent inspection, and if something comes up, then you hire another person. So an exploratory evaluation of the slab is warranted in this case, and we have been setting money aside too. And so I think we don't need any more deferred maintenances on our Evanston properties. There's hundreds of millions of dollars in CIP funds right now being set aside because we didn't do things when we should have done it. When it's a little problem, you can rectify it. When it becomes a big problem, it becomes a bond issue. The second thing I wanted to comment on is, we need fiscal responsibility here. And one of the things that I get concerned about in our city is how many hundreds of thousands of dollars we spend on consultants. And I feel we need to really reel that in and start using some of our Evanston expertise. But I realize we can't always do that. And we have $194,000 for 2 parks. We're spending an average of $80,000 per park consultant to $90,000. And that is a lot of money. And I think that we can find another way. And I know that I think it's Ridgeville Park District. I do not think they hire consultants. They contact the companies that design these projects, that build and create and install these playgrounds, and they tell them what they want, and then those guys come up and they tweak it with the board. At least this is what I've been told. And so they spend zero money on consultants. And I really want us to reevaluate how we are proceeding, because we can spend the money and we have an extra $100,000 on an extra park. So those are the 2 things I'd like you to consider, but please, $14,000 to evaluate what's going on with those cracks, because those cracks have been growing. At first I wasn't concerned.
If you could wrap up, please.
I'm done, but I think you need to really all do that for the benefit of the residents. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Rosinski. Tricia Connolly. She's not online. Going once, twice, going 3 times, not online. So is there anybody else wishing to address the committee? Nobody in person, nobody online? Okay. That concludes public comment, and we'll move forward with the consent agenda. Are there items which committee members would like to remove from consent?
A12?
Consent only goes through A11.
I will remove A1, A2, and A8. Anything else? Seeing none, the consent agenda will consist of items A1 through A11 with the exception of A1, A2, and A8. If somebody would like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Reed, seconded by Councilmember Harris. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and do we have Councilmember Burns online yet? Okay, so by a unanimous vote of those present, the consent agenda passes, which brings us to item A1. I removed that.
I'll move item A1.
It's been moved by Councilmember Reed and seconded by
Second?
Councilmember Kelly. I removed that item because I need to recuse myself. There is an item on the bills list. We have $32,500 being paid to my wife's employer, so I will be recusing myself from this vote. Is there any further comment on A1? Seeing
Yeah.
none?
Oh, I'm sorry. I have
sorry.
my light on. I want to amend the bills list based on information that we recently got from HR and to include $2,100 for Jordy Amaral, which was work conducted in the clerk's office a while ago.
Can you say the numbers again?
It's to pay a past due bill for the clerk's office under the previous administration.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any comment or question? I think Councilmember Harris had a question.
I'll just have to abstain as I'm unclear of what it is that's passed.
Okay. I will weigh in and say this is something that we had discussed both in this committee and at the council level in the past, and had declined to take action on this payment. But it has been properly moved and seconded, so.
I'll just add a note. This was for a contractor for the clerk's office in 2020, right before the pandemic started. We had a hiring freeze at the time, but this was an independent contractor, and the clerk, as an officer of the city that's independent of the manager's office, hired on a contractor to do work in the clerk's office. The contractor happens to be a young man who is a college student, and the council, I think, previously incorrectly declined the payment. And based on information I think we all got recently in exec regarding when an officer of the city enters into a good faith contract with someone that, we're on the line for paying that, and particularly since this is a young man who's a college student, even if there was a mistake, which I maintain that there wasn't, and I think we got some clarification from from Dirk Price and from Megan Fulara, that we are obligated to pay it. I think with that new information and that corrected understanding, that we should approve this and get this young man who's a college student paid.
Our city attorney is wishing to weigh in here.
Yes, thank you, Chair Newsma. Alexandra Ruggie, Assistant City Attorney. I would just note that this item is not on the agenda, so I want to avoid any Open Meetings Act violations. So I would suggest if this bills is going to move forward, it be placed on the agenda prior, but it's not on tonight's agenda.
Yeah, I mean, the bills list is on the agenda. So, I mean, we make amendments to things all the time that aren't on agendas. So this is an amendment to something that is on the agenda. So there'd be no concern about an Open Meetings Act violation.
I would suggest so that Councilmember Harris and Councilmember Hadakatis, for that matter,
Is he on this committee?
might be able to fully consider this, when it gets to council, that we defer this conversation to a future meeting, so that all the council members can have something in front of them to fully consider
Luke,
the
is
situation.
Megan here or is Dirk here?
Megan wasn't expected to participate in EW. I can try to reach her, but
Maybe before council we can get in contact with Megan.
she was planning
Or-
to be available for council.
So I think, we can vote on this now. Megan will be available for council. She can answer a question about this if there is one. I think, given Do you know if Dirk is planning to be here today? No. But if we have questions about it, we can certainly have access to Megan.
I don't feel it's appropriate to approve expenses on the fly without seeing something in writing in front of us.
It's $2,000 for a college student that we.
Nonetheless, and I know fully well what you're talking about, but I don't feel it's proper to approve expenses just based on a verbal discussion without seeing something. It's been properly
of order.
moved and seconded. If you're not willing to bring this back up in writing at a future ANPW meeting, we can vote on it now, and it moves to council as you suggested.
Thank you. I do have a question. When a chair recuses themselves from, an item, are they to, one, be chair? I mean, I've seen Councilmember Ravel, for example, recuse herself from an item, and she steps down as chair and does not participate in the discussion on that item. Is that typically the proper course of action?
I would believe that's up to the person recusing themselves. I believe in this instance, Chair Newsma has recused himself to a particular bill on the bills list, not, but I believe he could speak to adding a bill to the bills list that doesn't have to do with the reason he's recused himself, so he can still be chair for this item.
Okay, that's just a point of information for clarity.
All right, so it has been properly moved and seconded. So let's vote on the amendment. And Councilor Ruggie, if I'm understanding you correctly, I'm free to vote on the amendment,
That's correct.
but not on eventually when we vote on the
But
underlying item.
That's
So,
correct.
It's an amendment to the bills list that you've recused yourself from. So I think you'd recuse yourself. If you're recusing yourself from the bills list, I think you'd recuse yourself from everything related to the bills list.
I'm gonna go with Attorney Ruggie's assessment that I'm free to participate in this amendment discussion, but would have to recuse myself from
That's like
the bills list
someone
entirely.
who is, and I'm not, but I'm just saying that's like, if I had to recuse myself from an item and someone was to, Councilmember Ravel, I forget something she's recused herself from. That's like her recusing herself from that. But when we're talking about amendments to that item, she participates in the conversation. And it would seem that even an amendment to something you're recusing yourself from is something you would recuse yourself from.
I mean, I think in this instance, the amendment has nothing to do with the reason that Councilmember Newsma's recused himself. They're completely separate items. Adding the $2,000 for the contractor to the clerk's office, Councilmember Newsma has no conflict in that item.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let the record show that Councilmember Burns is now present, and Deputy Manager Stoneback, I will ask for a roll call vote on the amendment to add an additional, is the number, Councilmember Reed, is it $2,000?
Up to $2,100, yes.
Up to $2,100, as indicated by Councilmember Reed. So I'll call for a vote on that amendment.
Councilmember Kelly,
Aye.
Councilmember Harris,
Abstain.
Councilmember Newsma,
Nay.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
By a vote of 3-1 with one abstention, that amendment passes, and that brings us to a vote on the underlying item, which is approval of the bills list item A1. I'll call for a vote on that.
Councilmember Kelly. Aye. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma.
Abstain.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Item A1 as amended passes by a vote of 3-1 with one abstention. That brings us to item A2. If somebody would be so kind as to make a motion on item A2.
So moved?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Kelly, seconded by Councilmember Harris. Is there anybody wishing to comment on item A2? If not, I was the one who pulled this from the agenda. I'm fully supportive. I just wanted to take this opportunity to make a point We're talking about our city's recycling and waste and composting program here. And I want to make a point that there's an opportunity for Evanston residents to both save money and reduce landfill waste by switching from a 95-gallon garbage can to a 65-gallon garbage can. I'm not sure folks are aware that's even an option, but you can save up to $153 a year, even more at the prices next year. If you're not using all the space in your large garbage can, switch to a medium one, save yourself some money. And this is a way to do the right thing by your personal finances and fulfill some CARP goals at the same time. So I just want to take this opportunity to make that point. If there are no further discussion, if there's no further discussion in A2, I will just call for a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item A2 passes unanimously, bringing us to item A8. If somebody would like to make a motion on item A8.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Council Member Kelly, seconded by Council Member Burns. Is there any discussion on item A8? Council Member Kelly, followed by Council Member Burns.
So I did amend this, and I think everybody got a copy of the amended request here, or recommended action from contracting with Jenny in the amount of $12,800 just for phase one, and from there they can determine if more is necessary or not. But that alone will give us information that's really necessary that we obtain in terms of accountability and understanding the issues at hand with the construction. So. Do I move to amend it now?
Let's ask Attorney Ruggie to weigh in here. What would be the proper course of action? Councilmember Kelly wishes to amend the request to $12,800 for phase one.
Yeah, I sent it out earlier.
I believe she should, or someone should make a motion for the amendment, and then we can vote on that.
Okay.
Okay, so let's, I'll consider that a motion.
Yeah.
If somebody would like to second that motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Councilmember Kelly and Councilmember Burns to amend item A8 to the dollar amount of $12,800. Is there any discussion on that amendment? We still have discussion on the underlying item.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you want to vote on this first, and then we
So
can go
let's
back
vote
to
on
that?
that
Yeah,
amendment
that's
and
fine.
then the underlying item. So I'll just call for a voice vote on that amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. So item A8 by unanimous vote has been amended. The dollar amount is now $12,800, and that brings us to discussion on the issue itself. Councilmember Burns, I believe you're next.
And I guess as everybody is supportive, then I don't need to make a comment, but is that not the case?
That is not the case.
Okay, so I will make a comment. So I started this off as a blank slate, like many of the things that we discuss here at council. I am not an expert on this at all, and so I really rely on staff's opinion. And for this particular matter, I reached out to the community, talked to somebody who's been working in concrete for 30 plus years. And when I first described this, they were like, yeah, it's usual to have some stress cracking or gaps, totally usual. What are we looking at? Probably the size of a hairnail. I said, well, it's a little bit bigger than a hairnail. Let me send you over, what one of our residents have put together and along with the photos, and then let's talk. And then after seeing it, they said unequivocally that at least from their experience, and again, it's 30 plus years, that those are not, that they don't seem to be, stress or, I forgot the other term that was used related, but that there likely are some deeper issues that went on in this particular project. And this is somebody that I really, that I really trust for issues such as this. So I did not start off in support of this. I definitely didn't support the 46,000. So I appreciate the amendment. This same individual that gave me this feedback initially said even the 12,000 seemed a bit too much But then I read over what the phase one was to this individual, and they said, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Because essentially it was everything he was telling me we would need to do in order to determine what took place in this situation. And I think the other alternative that he said, but again, in the end, he agreed that we could reach out to the supplier of the concrete, and then they could take some core samples, I think is what they said, to determine a bunch of different things. It was all, I haven't had enough time to research this fully, but I do trust this person's opinion, and they said it's a good, that 12,500, I believe, is a phase one amount, that is a reasonable amount to do the work that will be provided in the phase one. So I will support this.
Councilmember Reed.
I'm also supportive of this. I too am not an expert in this kind of construction, but you know, seeing the cracks that are there. Speaking to residents this weekend, also, I've had a number of conversations about this. But this weekend also, Mike Vasilka reached out to me and supported this, which if anyone who knows Mike has never supported the city spending on a contractor. And so, you know, I do think this is important to the community. We want to make sure that we got that we're getting what we paid for. And so I'm sorry, I missed for a second what this was amended down to.
12,800.
Okay, yeah. 12,800. So, I mean, when we're talking about 12,800 to engage in this, I think it makes sense. And Ms. Biggs, is this something you can speak on?
The chair will recognize City Engineer Laura Biggs.
Thank you, Ms. Biggs. So I would just like to know what your thoughts on this are.
Well, I am not a licensed structural engineer. As Mike Vasilko, I believe, pointed out, the city does not employ directly on staff any licensed structural engineers. And so I am relying on consultants that we have hired to do this design. The design was done and checked by Stern Joglakar, which is a very reputable firm. They've done a tremendous number of projects like this for a wide variety of communities and educational institutes. So I have every reason to respect what they say, as that this is legitimately okay. However, should the city council choose to get extra assurance, there's certainly no harm in getting that done, other than the $12,800 in cost.
And, you know, and I would imagine that if we didn't do this and there was some issue, that we could end up paying hundreds of thousands of dollars?
It would depend sort of what the issue is. Certainly that there is a period of warranty in which we have more power to go back and say that there any issue that we identify that we consider it not to be according to the warranty, that period is really past. Mm-hmm. If there's found to be a fundamental defect that was not easily detected, I would have to defer to the law department, but in other cases, they have gone back to the contractors outside of warranty periods and discussed that with them. I think they'd have to review what the defect was specifically, and then go out, then talk to the consultant.
Kind of, again, I'm also not a structural engineer, but you're a chief engineer. So would this would this agreement, or would this investigation, would these services be able to determine if there is a fundamental, just to be clear, if there's a fundamental flaw?
They would determine some types of flaws. I mean, definitely they would be able to tell us if there is something that they consider to be a serious concern. I mean, just from a lot of what the discussions we've had internally with some of the council members and externally with the contractors and Woodhouse Tanucci, the architect, and Stern Joglakar, it's definitely they are cracks on the larger side. I have seen structural cracks, and I shouldn't call them structural. I have seen cracks that occur in concrete slabs that are not just hairline cracks, that have seemed acceptable. So I really dislike saying that I am a total expert. I think this could be found to be totally acceptable by Woodhouse, or I'm sorry, by Wisgenny, or it might not.
Okay. Well, it's $12,800. There's an old adage, penny wise, pound foolish, or penny wise, dollar foolish. And so I think spending $12,800 to have a very clear assessment of if we're putting the taxpayers at a liability of potentially, hundreds of thousands, whatever it is of dollars, that it just makes sense to have this second set of eyes look at this for such a, minimal amount of money.
Does anybody else want to weigh in before I add my 2 cents? Councilmember Kelly.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I put this forward, and I have witnessed the cracks have grown over time. I mean, over little time, over months, showing that these are active. So I do think it's incumbent upon us to make sure, like if there is something serious, again, it is could potentially save us taxpayers hundreds of thousands. I did consult with our legal office, and it is 4 years from the time of discovery for something significant that's not just plain workmanship stuff. 4 years from the time of discovery and up to 10 years from the time of completion, from substantial completion, that we would be able to recoup expenses, including, I imagine, this $12,800, which would come from the Robert Crown Construction Fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kelly. And I'll thank you for giving me the opportunity to dust off my engineer hat and wait around in some engineering specs, which I haven't done for quite some time. I, too, am not a licensed structural engineer and never was, but I just want to emphasize to the public that cracks in concrete floors are normal and to be expected. And I'll quote from the American Concrete Institute, their specification 302.1R-15. Even with the best floor designs and proper construction, it is unrealistic to expect completely crack and curl-free floors. It's completely normal to expect some sort of cracking. There are other specs and other guidance from the Concrete Institute, from the American Society of Concrete Contractors that indicate cracks are normal and to be expected. If you pay attention, and now that you will, if you're listening to this, next time you're out in a big box store, look at the concrete floor, you're going to see cracks. They're normal, and it doesn't mean anything is wrong. It's just the nature of the beast with this kind of construction. So $12,800 is certainly less of a hit than $40,000 or whatever it was. It's not going to break the bank, but still, that's a lot of money to just have somebody tell us what we really already know. It's $12,800 for, and I told you so. And I have no reason to second guess the professional opinion of our engineering staff, of the architect Woodhouse Tanucci, of the contractor Bully Andrews. So I'm going to oppose this. Yeah, we do have to be mindful of our financial resources, even though it's $12,800. I don't want to set the precedent that any time a light bulb burns out at Robert Crown that we're going to call in an electrical engineer to review the design and make sure it was installed properly. Like, Robert Crown cost a lot of money. That's in the past. That's behind us. We need to move forward here. So I'm going to vote against this. And if there's no further comment, let's call for a roll call.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
No.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
By a vote of 4-1, A8 passes, which brings us to our items for consideration, starting with A12. If somebody would like to make a motion on item A12. This is on Resolution 63-R-22, recognizing the public benefit of the city paying private sewer repair line costs in excess of $15,000 per repair for a residential property.
I move approval.
Second.
It has been properly moved by Councilmember Reed, seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Is there any discussion on item A12? Councilmember Kelly.
Pardon me. I'd like to move to hold this until the October meeting, only because of some of the additional details in here with regard to like house and insurance. I was in conversations today, and I wish I could have done it earlier bandwidth, but with the Chicago's Commissioner of Water, understanding a little bit their program, and I will have someone come to speak to us about the expense. In Chicago, they pay for all of the work under any of the public ways, under the streets for residents. I'm not at all proposing that we cover the 100% cost. I think this is mostly almost exactly perfect, but I think there's a few little pieces that still need to be ironed out. And I've discussed with other council members here. So I'd just like to hold this. I think we'll wrap this up in October. And I will have someone come to speak so we can also ask questions to the Chicago with the Chicago Water Department to understand their program. And again, I'm not advocating that we go the way of Chicago, but I think it's just helpful to understand that process. So I'd like to move to hold this.
Second.
Oh, well, hold on. Point of order, it's a motion to table at committee.
I'm sorry. So if it's till October 10th, that's table?
We're not allowed to hold in committee, so it's tabled.
So I'd like to table until October 10th.
You can
Yeah,
table it
second.
October 10th, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been moved by Councilmember Kelly, seconded by Councilmember Burns, that we table item A12 until our next regular meeting. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion to table item A12 carries unanimously. That brings us to item A13, which is ordinance 95-0-22, amending City Code Section 3-4-6C to reduce annual fees for Class C liquor licenses. Is there any discussion? Is there a motion on item A13?
So moved?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Kelly, seconded by Councilmember Reed. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Kelly.
Obviously, I'm supportive of this. I think I heard about this from some of our restaurant owners and just wondering why they, again, I think as the farmhouse, owner of farmhouse spoke this evening, TJ, it's just, they're also hit with high rents downtown, and we're struggling to get out of COVID. And I think what we really need to support our downtown businesses. So I think this is something that we really need to do, not hit them again with almost a double the fee for the liquor license, annual liquor license. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to comment on this one before I weigh in? I will agree that helping our downtown businesses is super critical as we bounce back from COVID and the many challenges that have kind of compounded since then. So I'm going to support this. I don't want to set a precedent, though, that other holders of other classes of licenses can come back to us and ask for a reduction. Year to date, we have brought in over $400,000 in revenue from liquor licenses. That's an important source of revenue for our city, and it would be, financially imprudent to start willy-nilly reducing liquor license costs. So I'll support this one, but hopefully it will go no further. So, seeing no further discussion, I will call for a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Councilmember Reed, I think, is indicating in the affirmative. So item A13 carries unanimously, which brings us to item A14, which is ordinance 84-0-22, authorizing the city manager to execute a lease amendment for property located at 2603 Sheridan Road, which is Harley Clark Mansion, for Artist Bookhouse. Is there a motion on item A14?
So moved, I guess.
It's been moved by Councilmember Burns, seconded by Councilmember Harris. Is there any discussion on item A14? It's my understanding that Audrey Niffenegger is online, and Ms. Niffenegger, who is the main artist bookhouse person, if you'd like to weigh in here, you have the floor.
Thank you. So we've requested the amendment after consulting with city staff because the benchmarks in our lease were optimistic, and COVID continues to put a damper on in-person gatherings. And on the upside, we are now working with a fundraising organization called Sprout Partnerships. We're working on hiring our executive director, and we have two board members who are about to join the board who have fundraising experience. So things are actually looking up, but these amended benchmarks would help us a lot. Instead of requiring that we have $2 million in hand this coming May, the benchmark says we should have $1 million by the end of this year, which is actually achievable. It also changes the phases of construction so that we would begin by working on the exterior of the building, which frankly just seems like it should have been the obvious thing to do from the beginning. Securing the integrity of the outside of the building would be just a sensible, good first move. It's also something that we would be able to afford to do with our $1 million that we will have raised very soon. So this amendment is both more in line with the reality and something that is quite achievable for us.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee have any questions or follow-up? Councilmember Ravel wishes to address the committee. Councilmember Ravel?
If I may, just as the council member for the ward where the Artist Bookhouse resides, I would just like to encourage your support of this amendment. Audrey and her board have done a lot of work since they signed the lease to clear out the house and be able to actually open it up for, well, they just had a very successful book sale a weekend ago, and they do a wonderful Halloween decor thing that the community enjoys. So they're a very active presence already in the community, despite the fact that they are still needing to raise a significant number of dollars. And I think, as Audrey's just described now, they've got a really solid plan for the rest of this year with the staff that can help them, and a reduced fundraising target for the year, which I think is much more achievable than the original target. So I urge your support.
Thank you, Councilmember Ravel. Any other comments or questions? I will then call for a voice vote. All in favor of item A14? Aye. Any opposed? Item A14 carries unanimously. Before we wrap up here, Deputy Manager Stoneback has called to my attention that we did not approve the minutes because they were not included on consent. So if somebody would like to move approval of item AM1, which is the approval of the minutes from our September 12th meeting.
I move approval.
It's been moved by Councilmember Reed, seconded by Councilmember Kelly. I will call for a roll call vote on this one. So Councilmember Harris can recuse herself since she was not on the committee at that meeting.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Item AM1 passes with a vote of 4 in favor, 0 against, and 1 abstention. Are there any items for a discussion to be brought before the committee? Any items for communication? Seeing none, I will adjourn the meeting at 5:46.